Hello, I'm Chris Hartwell, and welcome to The Heartbeat, the place where I talk about just a few of the things that make this little guy tick. Today, I'm going to be talking about Quentin Tarantino's The Hateful Eight. Join me, won't you? So, obviously I have no clue when you guys are actually watching this, but right now, as I'm filming this, it is Christmas, so Merry Christmas, everyone. And with that said, let's go ahead and jump in and talk about this very happy, feel-good holiday film. Set in the post-Civil War, kind of frozen wasteland of Wyoming, The Hateful Eight centers around, you guessed it, 8 hateful characters who are kind of forced together because of this blizzard that snows it into this lodge called Minnie's Haberdashery. And it's there that bounty hunter John Ruth discovers he could not have asked for worse company, as he soon becomes convinced that one of them is there to free his prisoner, Daisy Darmague. And from that point on, it's not really about the if, but the when, the why, and the how that first shot will be fired. Now, as I'm sure you've heard, this film has had quite the behind-the-scenes journey, which I mention now not only because it's interesting, but also because I really feel like you can sense that in the final product. So initially, Quentin Tarantino, wanting to continue the story of Django Unchained's title character, but without making a film sequel, aimed to actually write a paperback novel titled Django in White Hell. But as he started work on that novel, really intentionally allowing the story to evolve as he wrote each new page, he discovered 2 things. 1, he was liking the story more and becoming less and less willing not to turn it into a film. And 2, all the characters seemed to be working with the exception of Django. And the specific reason why Django wasn't working for him is when all the characters arrived at Minnie's haberdashery, he wanted everyone to be suspect and no one to act as the moral center for the film. And because of the audience's previous experience with Django, on Django Unchained, he was automatically trustworthy. So, the solution? Bye-bye Django, and hello Major Warren. And again, the reason I mention this is that feeling of unpredictability and looseness, which Tarantino at least partially infused into this film by kind of allowing the story to be figured out as he wrote it, was one of the things that at least 90% of the time worked really well on this film. Because again, that feeling of unpredictability is exactly what you want on a who gonna do it turned who did it kind of film. But even as certain elements didn't reveal themselves to Tarantino until I got to them, there was one thing that he very clearly knew from the outset, which was someone will eventually pull that trigger. And he really just used that inevitability to ratchet up the tension and definitely bring the audience into that room. And this is definitely a feeling and an idea that he's loved playing with for his last 3 films, those being Django Unchained, Inglourious Basterds, and now with The Hateful Eight, where he's actually challenged himself even more, not only by stretching the runtime out to 2 hours and 47 minutes, but also by setting nearly the entire film in one location. And quite impressively, one of the words that I would not use to critique this film was actually boring. And of course, that doesn't mean I don't have a few complaints about the piece, but it certainly kept my attention anyways for the near 3-hour runtime. And a lot of that I have to attribute just to Tarantino's strength as a writer. Because like Aaron Sorkin, the writer of The West Wing, The Social Network, and this year's Steve Jobs, Tarantino has such a distinctive voice, which is probably most clearly seen in his dialogue. And on this film especially, he really intentionally repeats and rhymes certain phrases, scene to scene, moment to moment, which really ultimately creates this great rhythm and syncopation that runs throughout the piece. And another way that Tarantino kind of demonstrates his incomparable style are just the names that he gives to his characters, from Daisy Darmague, to Major Marcus Warren, to General Sandy Smithers, and of course, Six-Horse Judy. But it's not just the names that make each of these characters so enjoyable, because though they are differing degrees of hateful, each of them does have a very unique way of expressing that feeling. And also Quentin kind of avoids predictability with the characters by making a lot of them very intelligent, which definitely cuts off the easier, less interesting ways to betrayal, deception, and murder. And of course, Quentin never fails to round out a group of ruffians by balancing their unwavering willingness to blow one another's heads off with an insistence for good coffee. And of course, no character, no matter how important they might seem, is safe on a Tarantino film. A fact that always ups my enjoyment of his films, because I really can't predict who will live and who will die. But the strength of this film was not just found in the writing, but also in the visuals as well. Tarantino actually resurrected a film format which hadn't been used since the 60s, and only 10 other films have actually shot on, the likes of which were Ben-Hur, How the West Was Won, and It's a Mad, 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 Mad World. And though it may seem almost delusional to use the widest film format possible to shoot a primarily interior film, it actually did do a couple cool things. One, in the moments the film was out of doors, it really did allow those landscapes and that weather to really become additional characters. And 2, when the action does move into memes, the ultra-wide frame forces those different groups to be doing something in every shot. which not only lent a level of reality and really invited the audience to pay closer attention, but also as the tension rose, it further raised that feeling of these characters being inescapably and claustrophobically caged together. A feeling that is very reminiscent of another Kurt Russell film, The Thing. And I've got to mention the music. Ennio Morricone, who's worked on maybe one or two other kind of well-known westerns, maybe like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and Once Upon a Time in the West, as well as the aforementioned The Thing, did the music on this film as well, and really from his opening overture. Yes, there is an overture on this film. He really did set a great kind of unsettling, something bad is about to happen kind of mood. And also, speaking of music in this film, there was a couple of great instances where characters actually in the film play music, whether it be piano or guitar, and really kind of, in a cool way, juxtapose what's happening elsewhere in Minnie's haberdashery. Now, I don't think very many of us can deny the fact that Tarantino is one of the great film fans of all time. I mean, the guy has a nearly encyclopedic knowledge of film history, and his own work is proof of that in how his films are constantly referencing and paying homage to so much that's come before them. Far, far more than I am learned enough to catch, much less analyze. And though the commonly used phrase, you have to know the rules before you break them, does kind of afford Tarantino a fair amount of license to break the rules when it comes to structure, pace, and characterization, and to do so with a lot of fun and style, I couldn't help but feel at certain points in this film kind of that outlook of I can do anything and everything I want, leading to just a bit of overindulgence, specifically in the structure and in the characterization. Now, structurally, this film actually has a lot in common with a couple other Tarantino films, those being Kill Bill and Death Proof. That being, about halfway through each of those films, something occurs which unavoidably alters the flow of the story. And it was that, along with a ballooning running time, that actually prompted Tarantino to split Kill Bill into two separate volumes. And though on The Hateful Eight I didn't experience as much whiplash as I did on a film like Death Proof, I still feel like there was a portion of this film that was at least somewhat lessened because Tarantino didn't have that aimed for destination from the outset, kind of leading to this somewhat self-indulgent rabbit trail that I felt like anyways was more of a step back versus a furthering of the story that we had become invested in. Even Tarantino himself has admitted that were he to eventually adapt this story for the stage, rearranging that portion of the story would be a likely change. Also, the characterization was just classic Tarantino, with a lot of the different players literally telling us who they were. But here, that approach kind of so saturated the film that it started to lose a bit of its effectiveness. Like, literally every 10 minutes someone was stopping and saying, "You mean you've never heard of so-and-so?" And then proceeding to tell us about so-and-so. And again, this is one of those rules of film, show, don't tell, that Tarantino breaks all the time, and does so to great effect. I just felt like it was a little overused here. So to wrap things up, there's actually a moment in this film where one character spits into another character's face, which is kind of an unfortunately apt way to describe my experience, at certain points anyways, on this film, which I can't necessarily classify as a critique, because I was surprised by the spit, and there was an impressive amount of it, and there was some good spread on the spray, but it's still spit in my face. Because with this film, Tarantino is yet again demonstrating not only his love for exploring the violent, the racist, and the sexist, but also enforcing his audience to identify with and root for at least one of those depraved characters. So while I cannot deny Tarantino's genius and one-of-a-kind style, neither can I deny how unpleasant it can be, at certain points anyways, to endure it. And no, this film is not just shockingly violent and vulgar for a Christmas film. It, without breaking a sweat, puts most Halloween films to complete shame. Nonetheless, I will still give The Hateful Eight a 3.5 out of 5. I would still love to know what you guys think though, so please comment below. Let me know what you thought. Where does this film fall in your Quentin Tarantino rankings? Also, please do subscribe. I'm going to continue to review films and television on this channel, and I would love for you all to stay up to date on all of those things. But for now, I'm Chris Hartwell. This is The Heartbeat. Thank you for joining me.